Deshaun Watson and Shedeur Sanders are fighting for the same starting job, but things are starting to get personal. Shedeur is winning over Browns fans, while Watson is getting booed in his own stadium. And after what Watson just said about the situation, this QB battle is getting messy. Let me break it down. Huntington Bank Field wasn't even full. It was Cleveland's second preseason game of 2026, a matchup against the Buffalo Bills that on paper meant nothing. No playoff seeding, no division standings, nothing but reps and evaluation. But for Deshaun Watson, it was the first time he'd stepped onto that turf since his career nearly ended on it. Watson played the third quarter into the fourth, taking over after Shedeur Sanders opened the game. And it did not go well. He completed 5 of 12 passes for 35 yards and 1 interception in the Browns' 31-7 preseason loss to the Buffalo Bills. The stadium noticed. He was greeted by a smattering of boos, which got louder after each failed possession. Watson didn't lead a scoring drive in 4 possessions. By the time he got to the podium, Watson wasn't in the mood to shrug it off. Reporters asked about the reaction from the crowd, and he didn't hold back. "I think the whole world knows it has nothing to do about the performance," Watson said. "It's a little bit more personal than that. So I think it's a disrespectful thing." Then he went further, and this is the part that turned a bad preseason outing into a full-blown story. Watson brought up a memory that Browns fans probably wanted buried. The last time he played meaningful snaps at that stadium, he tore his Achilles tendon against the Cincinnati Bengals. And as he lay on the field, some fans in the building cheered. "He hasn't let that go. Last time I played on this field, I tore my Achilles. And that same fan base, they cheered when I got hurt," Watson said. So what does that have to do with anything about performance? When a person gets hurt, especially for your own city, and they cheer. Watson said he'd rather keep most of what he's feeling to himself and his family. But the label stuck. Personal, not performance-based, not about the interception or the 35 yards. Personal. Now here's where Shedeur Sanders enters the frame, because this isn't just a quarterback venting into a microphone. This is happening in the middle of an actual competition for a job where every word either man says gets measured against the other guys. Sanders had started the same game. He'd looked sharp doing it too, completing all 4 of his pass attempts on the opening drive, before finding Luke Floria for an 8-yard touchdown to cap it off. He was pulled after the first half. Watson came in and struggled. And when reporters brought Watson's comments about the crowd to Sanders, the rookie didn't dodge it. He didn't pile on either. He drew a line that made the 2 quarterbacks look less like rivals and more like something else entirely. "In general, I don't appreciate that at all," Sanders said of the crowd reaction. "Regardless of competition, we're all human beings. For all the fans, we appreciate you showing up. And however you feel about the situation with Deshaun and everything, I think it's more about a bigger purpose, and it's respect." Read that back. Sanders didn't throw a jab at the guy he's trying to beat out for the job. He defended him. That's not what beef normally looks like on the surface. But stick with this, because the tension between these two isn't really about who likes who. It's about a locker room, a fan base, and a franchise that has to pick one of them. And soon, head coach Todd Monken had already spoken before Watson got to the microphone. And he wasn't hiding how the whole scene made him feel either. "It sucks," Coach Todd Monken said of the fan reaction. That's about as blunt as a head coach gets in a press conference. Monken has a decision to make, and he's watching one of his 2 options get booed out of his own building, while the other one gets praised for how he's handling it. This is the setup. A veteran quarterback with a 9-figure contract getting jeered by the people paying to watch him. A rookie outplaying him in the same game and then publicly standing up for him anyway. A head coach stuck between performance, chemistry, and a clock that's ticking toward a decision he has to make before the regular season starts. And it's worth sitting with how strange that dynamic actually is. Watson didn't blame Sanders for the boos. Sanders didn't use the moment to distance himself from Watson. If anything, the tension in Cleveland right now isn't quarterback versus quarterback. It's quarterback versus crowd, with a second quarterback caught in the crossfire of a job battle he didn't ask to be a referendum on. But make no mistake, there is heat here, and it's not manufactured. It's built into every part of how this competition is being covered, discussed, and dissected. Fans have picked sides. Analysts have picked sides. National media personalities have picked sides. And every time Watson opens his mouth about the fans, or Sanders opens his mouth about the competition, it gets measured against the other guy's stat line from that same game. Todd Monken had even more to weigh in his QB decision after Shedeur Sanders' strong play versus the Bills. And Deshaun Watson's comments about fans, that's the crossroads. A coach now has to decide if the guy who's more talented on paper, the $230 million former Pro Bowler, deserves the job over the second-year quarterback who's quietly become the fan favorite. And the noise around that decision has stopped being about football snaps. It's about who the city wants to root for. And Watson is now on record saying he doesn't think winning that fight is even possible. Watson said he's not sure if he can win back any fans. He's frustrated that the only time he feels animosity from Cleveland fans is when he's on the field. That's not a quarterback talking about a quarterback controversy anymore. That's a guy admitting he feels like an outsider in the city that traded 3 first-round picks to bring him in. So that's where things stand after one preseason game against Buffalo. A veteran calling the crowd's treatment of him personal. A rookie calling the same treatment disrespectful to people in general, while gently distancing himself from taking sides. And a head coach who now has performance data, fan sentiment, and a locker room dynamic all tangled together in one decision. He can't put off much longer. To understand how it got this heated, you have to go back to the moment that Watson keeps bringing up himself. The day his Achilles gave out on that exact field, and the reaction from the stands that he still hasn't forgotten. To understand why one bad preseason quarter turned into Watson calling out an entire fan base, you have to rewind to October of 2024, because that's the wound this entire story keeps reopening. Watson went down against the Cincinnati Bengals in a regular season game at that same stadium. He took the snap, ran with the ball, and with his first step crumpled to the ground in pain. As he remained down on the field, the Browns faithful booed him. An MRI the next day confirmed what everyone feared. Watson had ruptured his Achilles on the play and would miss the remainder of the season. That reaction from the crowd didn't stay contained to Cleveland. It reached LeBron James, who grew up an hour south of the city and has never hidden his connection to it. James posted directly at Browns fans, writing that he knew how much the fan base had been through over the years. Good, bad, and indifferent, and that booing anyone down with an injury, let alone their own player, was, in his words, lame AF. He made a point to salute the ones in the crowd who didn't join in. James wasn't the only voice from inside the building either. Browns players Myles Garrett and Jameis Winston also came to the defense of Watson in the days after the injury. This wasn't a fringe reaction. It was teammates and one of the most recognizable athletes on the planet, all saying the same thing. At the same time that cheering an injury crossed a line football fandom shouldn't cross. Kelly Stafford, wife of Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford, brought the moment back up on her podcast weeks later, using it as a jumping-off point to blast NFL fans in general for celebrating injuries. After a similar incident involving a Minnesota Vikings player, the Watson moment had become a reference point, a shorthand for a specific kind of ugliness in football fandom. So when Watson stood at that podium 2 years later and said the same fan base cheered when he got hurt, he wasn't inventing a grievance. He was pointing at something that had already been documented, condemned publicly by his own teammates, and called out by one of the most famous people to ever come out of the state of Ohio. But here's the part that makes Watson's frustration land differently than a normal athlete versus fan story. This wasn't his first injury with the Browns, and it wasn't even his worst luck. Watson has started just 19 games since the Browns acquired him in a blockbuster trade from Houston 4 years ago. They traded 3 first-round draft picks for the former Pro Bowler. He had season-ending shoulder surgery in 2023 and is coming back this season after twice rupturing his Achilles tendon. 19 starts, 4 years, 3 first-round picks, a shoulder surgery, and 2 separate Achilles ruptures. That's the resume fans are looking at every time Watson jogs onto the field. And it's the resume that's fueling the boos as much as any single interception against Buffalo. Watson knows the math doesn't look good, and he's tried publicly to close the gap between himself and the fan base in ways that go beyond the field. He was hoping that the situation regarding the fans' treatment of him would be better, given his involvement in the city, and after he worked to get himself back in position to compete to be the Browns' starting quarterback. I thought being away for 2 years and working myself back from 2 Achilles injuries, and putting the time in and being around the facility, being around the city, doing charity work in the city, supporting the Cleveland Browns, hanging out with fans whenever I do see them, being honest, being the type of person that I know I am, and the character would help, he said. And I guess it hasn't. That admission is the whole story in one sentence. 2 years of rehab, community work, showing up, and by his own account, none of it moved the needle with the people who matter most to how he's received in that building. This was his first game back in the stadium and admitted he didn't know if he could defeat that negativity. I don't know. It's a mental battle every day, he said. He went on to say he feels more supported on the road than he does at home, joking darkly that if the starting job ends up his, maybe the season plays out better as 17 road games. That's not a throwaway line from a guy who doesn't care what people think. That's a professional athlete describing a psychological weight he carries into every single home snap. And whether that weight affects his play is exactly the question hanging over the quarterback competition that's about to take center stage. Because here's the thing about the timing of all this. Watson isn't just dealing with the emotional fallout of an old injury. He's dealing with it while simultaneously trying to win his job back from a rookie who has already proven he can win games without him. The crowd's memory of the Achilles injury isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening at the exact moment Cleveland has to decide whether the guy they gave $230 million to is still their best option under center. That's the next piece of this puzzle, and it's the piece that turns a fan relations story into a genuine quarterback controversy with real stakes for both players involved. While Watson has been fighting the crowd, he's also been fighting Shedeur Sanders for the job itself. And this is where the story stops being about boos and starts being about a genuine, unresolved football decision that Cleveland can't put off much longer. Go back to when Watson wasn't even an option. Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski clearly liked fellow rookie Dillon Gabriel more than Sanders, with Sanders buried on the depth chart as the emergency QB3 at points during his rookie year. But injuries and benchings around him opened a door, and Sanders walked through it. Sanders sparked optimism after the benchings of Joe Flacco and Dillon Gabriel last year. He won 3 of Cleveland's 5 games and made the Pro Bowl as an alternate. That's a rookie, a 5th-round pick, taking over a broken quarterback room and actually winning football games. It's why by the time this offseason rolled around, a real chunk of the fan base and national media had started treating Sanders less like a developmental project and more like the answer. But Sanders' rookie tape wasn't clean, and that matters for how this battle has played out. Sanders' 10 interceptions since his NFL debut in Week 11 were the most in the NFL, and his 57% completion percentage ranked 2nd worst. As a prospect, Sanders was criticized for holding onto the ball too long and having a slow throwing operation. Those issues definitely showed up during his rookie season. So new head coach Todd Monken inherited a genuine dilemma the moment he took the job. Watson, when healthy, is the more talented passer with actual playoff pedigree from his Houston days. Sanders, even with the turnovers, had already shown he could win real games as a rookie. Monken had to design an entire preseason around figuring out which one gives Cleveland the better shot in 2026. The first test came against the Chicago Bears, and Monken made a decision that immediately raised eyebrows. He started Watson, not Sanders, in the opener. The Cleveland Browns mapped out their preseason quarterback plan when head coach Todd Monken named Deshaun Watson the starter against the Chicago Bears. It marked Watson's first game since 2024, and he looked solid despite the long hiatus. That result was close, but not decisive. If you had to pick a winner from that game, it was Watson. Since he received the start, he had to play against the Bears' starting defense. Watson's offense scored all 10 of the Browns' points, and he was the only quarterback who didn't throw an interception. Sanders had more explosive plays in the passing game, but it's hard to ignore his throw to the wrong team. Sanders got his turn the following week against Buffalo, and that's the game everything else in this story hangs off of. He came out sharp, going 73+ yards by completing 9 of 11 pass attempts, with a touchdown throw on the first drive, and he did it while Watson watched from the sideline. Then Watson took over in the second half and got booed off the field with an interception of his own. The head-to-head box score from that night is stark. Sanders started the game and was solid if unspectacular, finishing 9 of 11 for 74 yards, with a touchdown, interception, and sack taken. The interception wasn't great, however, as he threw behind his receiver on a short slant and the ball deflected into the air. Watson was awful. Meanwhile, finishing 5 of 12 for 36 yards and an interception. That line right there, solid but unspectacular versus awful, is exactly why the boos hit different that night. It wasn't just that Watson struggled. It's that the rookie he's trying to beat out had just done the job better, in front of the same crowd, minutes earlier. There's also a wrinkle that's been quietly building tension in this competition for weeks before either preseason game even kicked off. Back in training camp, Monken had told reporters it was going to be Sanders' day to get the bulk of first-team reps. Then practice started, and it didn't play out that way. Instead, Deshaun Watson handled most of the first-team work, leaving reporters and fans surprised. Darryl Reuter was among those to question the switch after watching practice unfold. Reuter didn't hold back on social media, saying he wasn't sure if it was intentional, but that Monken had told reporters beforehand it was Sanders' day for the top reps, only for that not to happen. Fan accounts online ran further with it, with one popular account posting that the competition wasn't being run in good faith and calling for a boycott until Sanders got treated fairly, a sign of just how invested the fan base had already become before a single preseason snap was played. Watson, for his part, made the most of the opportunity when it landed in his lap. He completed 23 of 34 passes with 4 touchdowns and no interceptions during that practice. Sanders still performed well with the second team, going 16 of 20 without a turnover. Both players did their jobs. The controversy wasn't about talent, it was about who Monken seemed to be favoring behind the scenes, and that suspicion has followed the competition ever since. By the time the second preseason game against Buffalo rolled around, ESPN's Jeremy Fowler had already framed it as a defining data point. After Cleveland's Week 2 preseason game against the Buffalo Bills was suspended for roughly an hour due to lightning, Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson got their latest, and perhaps final, chances to show they deserve to start Week 1 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's the stakes in plain terms. Whatever happened in that delayed, storm-interrupted game in Cleveland was shaping up to be close to the last real evidence Monken would get before making the call. And Monken himself has been careful, maybe deliberately vague, about how close he actually is to a decision. Well, at some point, I'm gonna have to decide, right? Monken said. I'm saying it kinda jokingly, like at some point we've gotta get that guy the reps. So I'm not gonna paint myself into a corner. Optimally, you'd like to have given a player all of the reps, and you know who the one is. We've done it as best we could as a staff, trying to work through this. That's a coach admitting almost in real time that he doesn't have a clean answer. And it's exactly the kind of uncertainty that's let outside voices, analysts, former players, talking heads with no stake in the actual roster rush in and turn a football decision into a full-blown media circus. Once Watson's comments about the fans went public, and once Sanders started outplaying him in real preseason snaps, this stopped being a Cleveland-only conversation. National media picked it up and ran, and the loudest of those voices did more than just analyze the tape. They picked a side publicly, forcefully, and repeatedly. Skip Bayless has been the most consistent name in that conversation. Before Watson had even played a preseason snap, Bayless was already skeptical of Monken's plan to start the veteran first. When it was announced Watson would get the nod in the opener against Chicago, Bayless posted his disagreement in stark terms. The fact Deshaun Watson is starting the first Browns preseason game tells you new coach Monken wants to start him in the season opener. Big mistake. This rising team should belong to Shedeur Sanders, especially after adding talented rookies. Casey Concepcion and Denzel Boston, Bayless wrote. That wasn't a one-off take he'd move past. When Sanders outplayed Watson again in the Buffalo game, Bayless doubled down, this time in all capital letters on social media, declaring flatly that Cleveland would win more games with Sanders at quarterback than with Watson under center. It's the kind of unqualified statement that gets clipped and shared everywhere, and it did exactly that, becoming a talking point across multiple outlets, covering the QB battle within hours. Bayless wasn't operating off nothing either. He pointed to the fact that Watson hasn't played since the 2024 season, due to significant Achilles injuries, as the core of his argument, a 30-year-old with a devastating injury history against a 24-year-old, who'd already proven he could win games as a rookie. It's a clean, simple case, and it's one a lot of national commentators have echoed in different words. Former players have weighed in too, and not all of them agree with Bayless. Ex-NFL defensive tackle Bryden Fehoko pushed back publicly against the growing chorus, demanding Sanders take the job, arguing Watson remains Cleveland's best option at QB1 despite the preseason results. That's the split running through the entire conversation. One side pointing at box scores and momentum, the other pointing at pedigree and what Watson looked like before the injuries piled up. Even broadcasters, calling the games in real time, couldn't stay neutral about how strange this whole situation has become. During the Bears game, Bears TV analyst Stacey Dales made a point of noting how she felt for Browns fans, given how long they've spent on this dizzying quarterback carousel. That's not a hot take. That's a broadcaster on the opposing team's call, stopping to acknowledge on air how chaotic Cleveland's quarterback situation has become, a level of dysfunction significant enough to draw sympathy from the other sideline. Layer onto that the fact that this competition carries weight far beyond one roster spot. Writers have pointed out that the battle between Sanders and Watson for the Browns' starting job is the first of its kind in NFL history, one of the most intriguing preseason quarterback competitions in recent memory, described as another footnote in the long evolution of black quarterbacks climbing to the top of the league. This season, both players have much to prove and many doubts to erase. That framing matters because it explains why this story traveled so far past Cleveland sports radio. It's not just a battle for a job, it's being watched as a statement about who gets a second chance in this league and who gets forced to seize their first one immediately with no grace period. Then there's the financial and franchise-shaping angle that's been quietly circling this whole competition. Watson is still owed money on a contract under which he's delivered only 19 touchdown passes in 19 games during his $230 million deal. That number gets repeated constantly by critics, and it's the backbone of why fans feel entitled to boo. They're not just watching a struggling quarterback, they're watching one of the most expensive contracts in league history struggle in real time. Some analysts have gone as far as suggesting that if Watson forces his way back into the lineup, it could end Sanders' time in Cleveland altogether. One piece laid out how a healthy, entrenched Watson could push Sanders down the depth chart entirely, to the point where Sanders could get bumped to the practice squad and become vulnerable to be poached by another team looking to add him straight to their active roster. That scenario alone is enough to explain why fans have gotten emotionally invested in who wins this job. It's not just about this season. It's about whether Cleveland keeps a quarterback plenty of national voices think is a rising building block. And through all of it, Monken has stayed in the middle, refusing to let outside noise rush him. Reporters have pressed him directly on the timeline, and he's kept the answer deliberately open-ended. It is possible, Monken said on the pregame radio show, talking about making a decision about the QB soon. I don't anticipate this. I do not anticipate the quarterback decision going past early in next week. By the end of next week, the Cleveland Browns will wrap up their preseason schedule. That's the position Monken is in, a decision that has become a national talking point. Two visibly frustrated stakeholders, an entire fan base split down the middle, and a clock that's officially started counting down toward the season opener against Jacksonville. So where does all of this actually land? Not with two quarterbacks throwing insults at each other, and not with a locker room split into warring camps. What's actually built up over these past few weeks is something closer to two players carrying separate burdens under the same spotlight, with a fan base and a head coach both trying to decide who deserves the benefit of the doubt. Watson's frustration is real, and it's rooted in something more specific than a bad box score. I thought being away for 2 years and working myself back from 2 Achilles injuries and putting the time in and being around the facility, being around the city, doing charity work in the city, supporting the Cleveland Browns, hanging out with fans whenever I do see them, Watson said, and I guess it hasn't. So that's why I say it's personal. So it is what it is. People have their own opinions. There's only so much you can do to change that. So at the end of the day, I just have to continue to just work on it and strive to be better mentally moving forward. That's a man who has clearly rehearsed this frustration in his own head many times before saying it out loud. And it lines up with something he said when asked directly whether he regretted ever coming to Cleveland in the first place. I don't regret anything in my life, Watson said. I think the Lord puts me in these situations for a reason. I don't regret anything at all. I had different thoughts on how it was going to be, but it is what it is. That's not the language of a guy plotting an exit or trying to torch a franchise on his way out. It's the language of someone who feels misunderstood and is choosing to stay anyway. Mental battle and all. Sanders, for his part, has never used this moment to elevate himself at Watson's expense, even when he's had every opportunity to. When his own big performance against Buffalo came up, his focus stayed on his own process rather than the man he's competing against. He's on record simply being proud of his efforts, saying, "I did everything I can." After that outing, a modest line from a guy who could easily be spiking the football on a struggling veteran instead. That's really the twist sitting underneath this entire story. The public heat isn't coming from Watson versus Sanders directly trading shots. It's coming from a fan base that's clearly exhausted after years of quarterback instability A media ecosystem that's turned every practice rep and every interception into a referendum. And a head coach who has to make a call soon, whether he's ready to or not. What makes this genuinely personal isn't one quarterback attacking the other. It's Watson feeling like 2 years of rehab and community work still weren't enough to earn trust back in his own building, while a 24-year-old who was a fifth-round afterthought a year ago has quietly become the guy that same fan base wants to rally around instead. That's a hard thing for any veteran to sit with, especially one who was supposed to be the franchise's long-term answer when Cleveland gave up 3 first-round picks to get him. And it's just as hard for Sanders, who has to prove he deserves the job on merit, while also navigating a locker room where the other guy competing for his spot is dealing with a very public, very raw grievance against the very fans Sanders needs on his side too. Every time Sanders is asked about Watson, he has to walk a line, respect the veteran, defend basic decency, and still make clear he's trying to win the job outright. Monken's decision, whenever it lands, will settle the football question, but it won't necessarily settle the tension that's built up around it. If Watson wins the job, he inherits a fan base that's already told him, loudly, twice now, that its patience is close to gone. If Sanders wins it, he inherits the goodwill of a fan base that turned on Watson fast, and the pressure of knowing exactly how quickly that same crowd can turn on him too. Either way, the quarterback who ends up under center in Cleveland's regular season opener against Jacksonville will do it under more scrutiny than almost anyone else at the position league-wide. Not because of one bad interception, and not because of one heated post-game quote, but because this competition, over the course of one preseason, turned into something bigger than either man wanted it to be. A fight over trust, memory, and who gets to represent a city that has made it clear it's watching every